In a quiet American suburb, beneath the gentle hum of passing cars and the laughter of neighborhood children, there lived a mother whose heart had been fractured by her own blood. She had given her entire life to a son she once cradled in trembling arms, but now, in her old age, she faced cruelty from the same hands she once fed. This is the story of how love turned into pain, how a mother's tears reached a courtroom, and how justice tried to mend what years of neglect had broken. It's a story of heartbreak, redemption, and the unyielding spirit of a woman who refused to disappear quietly. So stay till the end, because what begins with silence ends with a voice that echoes through every mother's heart. The sun had barely risen over the quiet streets of Cedar Grove, a small town on the outskirts of Illinois, when Martha Green placed her trembling hands on the edge of the kitchen counter. At 50, her back ached more from the weight of silence than from age. The house smelled of fresh coffee and resentment. Daniel, her only son, sat at the dining table scrolling through his phone, while Olivia, his wife, clanged dishes with a sharpness that wasn't just noise, it was a message. Martha had lived here for 2 years, ever since her husband's passing. Daniel had invited her with words that sounded kind back then. "You shouldn't be alone, Mom. Come live with us." But the warmth in those words had long faded. Now, each morning began the same way, with Martha serving breakfast that no one thanked her for. Olivia broke the silence first. "You forgot to buy almond milk again, didn't you?" she said without looking up. "Daniel likes almond milk in his coffee, not regular." Martha smiled softly, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm sorry, dear. I'll pick some up later today." Olivia's eyes rolled like it was rehearsed. "You always say that. Maybe if you remembered simple things, I wouldn't have to remind you every day." Daniel gave a faint smirk, hiding behind his coffee mug. "She's right, Mom. You've been forgetful lately." The words pierced deeper than they realized. Martha had once raised this man through nights of fever, through school projects and heartbreaks. Now she was reduced to a quiet shadow in her own son's house. She turned back to the stove, blinking fast so her tears wouldn't fall into the eggs. Her hands shook as she placed the plate before Daniel. He didn't even glance up. As she sat down quietly, Olivia sighed loudly. "You know, Daniel, maybe we should hire someone to help around the house, someone younger. Your mom's trying, but it's a lot for her." That was the first cut of the day, the kind that bleeds quietly, unseen. Martha looked out the window, her heart aching for the garden she once tended in her old home. She could almost hear her late husband's voice whispering, "Don't let anyone make you feel small, Martha." But she had. Every day. After breakfast, Daniel grabbed his coat and kissed Olivia on the cheek before leaving for work. He didn't even glance at his mother. The door clicked shut, and Olivia's expression changed instantly, softer, but only because she needed something. "By the way," Olivia said, crossing her arms, "the laundry needs folding. You know how Daniel likes his shirts ironed perfectly. You can handle that, right?" Martha nodded silently. "Yes, dear." When Olivia left the room, Martha sat in the chair Daniel had just vacated. The coffee mug still had his fingerprints. For a moment she whispered, "I miss the boy who used to hug me before school." Her eyes closed, and for the first time, she wondered if moving here had been a mistake. But deep inside, something else stirred, a faint spark of strength she hadn't felt in years. Something was changing inside her, even if no one else could see it yet. That night, Martha overheard a conversation she was never meant to hear, a conversation that would change everything and ignite the quiet rebellion she'd buried for too long. The clock ticked past 11 p.m. The house was quiet, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the soft murmur of voices upstairs. Martha couldn't sleep. She had been lying awake on her small bed in the guest room, the same room Olivia had once called the storage space, staring at the ceiling. Every creak in the house felt louder at night, every whisper felt heavier. She had just begun to drift off when she heard Daniel's voice. The walls were thin. She'd learned that long ago. At first, she thought it was just harmless chatter between husband and wife. But then the words became sharp. "She's been here long enough, Liv," Daniel said, his voice low but firm. "I can't keep doing this. She's making things awkward. The house feels crowded." Martha froze. Olivia laughed softly. "Crowded? It's your mother, Daniel. But you're right. She doesn't help much. The energy here is just heavy. I mean, look at how she walks around like a ghost. It's depressing." Daniel sighed. "She was different before Dad died. Now she just lingers. I feel guilty, but I think it's time we found her a place. Maybe an old folks' home." The words hit her like a blow to the chest. She pressed her hand against her mouth to keep from gasping. Her own son, the boy whose hand she'd held through nightmares, was talking about sending her away like an unwanted pet. Olivia continued, "I can look up some facilities tomorrow. There's one near Maple Avenue, nice place, and they handle everything. You'll have your peace, and she'll have company." Daniel chuckled lightly. "Yeah, company. That's one way to put it." Martha lay there, her heart pounding so loud she was sure they could hear it. Every syllable echoed through her, not just as words, but as betrayal. She wanted to burst into their room, to scream, "How could you?" But she didn't. She couldn't. She turned on her side, staring at the small framed picture on her nightstand. A photo of Daniel at age 10, standing beside her late husband, both smiling proudly after his first school play. She'd kept that photo close through every hardship, through every tear. Now it mocked her, a reminder of love that had faded. As the voices upstairs died down, Martha's tears came silently. She tried to pray, but even her prayers felt lost in the darkness. She didn't know what hurt more, Olivia's coldness or Daniel's silence. But as the minutes passed, something hardened inside her. Maybe this was what heartbreak did. It burned away weakness, leaving only resolve. She wouldn't beg to stay. She wouldn't plead for love. If they wanted her gone, they would have to look her in the eyes and say it. By morning, the decision was clear. She would not be the ghost in this house anymore. She would be seen, even if it meant standing alone. The next morning, Martha made a quiet plan. One that began with a letter and ended with the morning sun filtered weakly through the lace curtains as Martha sat at the small desk in her room. A blank sheet of paper lay before her, one of the few things truly hers in this house. Her hand trembled as she picked up the pen. For years, she had written grocery lists, reminders, and notes for her late husband. But this was different. She was writing her goodbye. Her handwriting was careful, almost too neat, as if she were afraid of making a mistake that would reveal her pain. "Daniel, my dear son, if you truly believe I am a burden, I won't stand in your way. I raised you to have peace in your home, and if my presence steals that, I'll leave quietly. I only hope that someday, when your own children grow older, you'll understand how a mother feels when her love becomes an inconvenience." Her hand paused. A tear fell onto the paper, smudging the ink. She didn't wipe it away. "Don't worry about me. I have learned to start over before. I can do it again. Take care of Olivia and be kind to her. But remember, kindness begins with your mother." She folded the letter carefully, placed it in an envelope, and set it on the kitchen counter where Daniel would see it. Then she sat back down in her chair and stared at her wedding ring. She still wore it, though her husband had been gone for 5 years. The memory of him, strong, kind, and endlessly patient, filled her chest like a soft ache. "George," she whispered to the empty room, "I think I finally understand what loneliness really means." Outside, the street was waking up. Neighbors watered their lawns, children waited for the school bus, and life went on, indifferent to her heartbreak. Just as she stood to pack a few clothes into her old brown suitcase, there was a knock at the door. Not a soft knock, firm, steady, like someone with purpose. Martha frowned. Olivia and Daniel had already left for work. Who could it be? She walked slowly to the door and opened it. Standing there was a tall man in his early 50s, dressed in a worn gray suit. His hair was grayer than she remembered, but his eyes, kind, sharp, familiar, hadn't changed. "Martha?" he said softly, her breath caught. "Tom?" It was her older brother, the one she hadn't seen in nearly 20 years. They had grown apart after her marriage, after life took them down different roads. She never thought she'd see him again. "I was passing through Cedar Grove," Tom said, holding a small bag. "Thought I'd stop by. I wasn't sure if you'd still be here." Her eyes filled instantly. "Tom, I can't believe it's you," he smiled faintly. "You look like you could use some company." For a moment, Martha felt something she hadn't felt in years. Safe. She stepped aside and let him in. As Tom entered the house, his expression changed. His gaze caught the envelope on the counter, her goodbye letter. He looked back at her, concern deep in his eyes. "Martha," he said slowly, "what's going on here?" Martha hesitated, her voice trembling. "Tom, I think I've been living in a house that forgot what love means." Tom's jaw tightened. Then maybe it's time someone remembered. Tom's arrival would set off a chain of events no one in the Green household expected, especially when Daniel came home that night and found his mother's letter. Missing. The afternoon sun dipped low, casting long golden streaks across the living room floor. Martha sat on the couch while Tom poured them both cups of tea. The house for once felt alive, like it remembered laughter, even if only faintly. Tom leaned back in the armchair, studying his sister. "You always did make a good cup of tea," he said, smiling. Martha chuckled softly, her eyes tired but warm. "I've had a lot of practice. It's what I do when I can't fix anything else. Make tea and hope it helps." Tom looked around, his expression darkening. "You're not happy here, are you?" She didn't answer immediately. Her fingers wrapped around the teacup like she was holding something fragile. "It's not that simple," Daniel thinks. "I make things harder. And Olivia, well, she has her ways of reminding me I don't belong." Tom's brow furrowed. "Since when does a mother have to earn a place in her own son's home?" Martha lowered her gaze. "Since she becomes a burden." Tom leaned forward, voice firm but gentle. "You are not a burden, Martha. You're his mother. You gave him everything." She smiled weakly. "Maybe I gave him too much." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the quiet hum of the old refrigerator. Tom's hand reached across the table, resting on hers. "You're coming with me," he said finally. "You'll stay at my place until we figure things out." "You don't need to live like this," Martha hesitated. Part of her wanted to say yes instantly, to escape, to breathe again. But another part of her still clung to Daniel, the little boy she once knew. "I can't just leave without saying anything," she whispered. Tom nodded. "Then tell him. But don't let them make you feel small when you do." That evening, as the clock ticked towards 6, Martha felt a strange calm. Tom had gone out to get dinner, promising he'd be back before Daniel returned. Martha decided to take a quiet walk around the block, just to clear her mind. Before she left, she looked at the folded envelope on the counter, her goodbye letter. With a sigh, she turned off the lights and stepped outside. But when Daniel and Olivia came home an hour later, the letter wasn't there. Daniel walked into the kitchen, tossing his keys onto the counter. "Mom?" he called out. No answer. He frowned. "Olivia, where is she?" Olivia shrugged. "Probably went for a walk or something." Then her eyes caught something under the fruit bowl, a torn corner of an envelope, just barely sticking out. She pulled it free and frowned. "What's this?" Daniel took it, unfolded what remained, and froze. The first few lines were smudged with ink and tears, but he could still read enough to understand. His throat tightened. "She was planning to leave." Olivia crossed her arms. "Leave? Where would she go?" Daniel stared at the letter, guilt swirling in his chest like a storm. He remembered the things he'd said, the cold mornings, the way she never talked back. He'd thought he was just being practical. But now, reading her words, he realized he'd been cruel. Olivia noticed the change in his face. "Daniel," she said carefully, "don't tell me you're feeling sorry for her now." He didn't answer. He just set the letter down and walked to the window, scanning the street. The sky was turning violet, the streetlights flickering on, and then, headlights. A car pulled up in front of the house, and Tom stepped out. Daniel's eyes narrowed. "Who the hell is that?" Tom opened the door without knocking, his tone calm but commanding. "Evening, Daniel. We need to talk." That night, old family wounds would reopen, and the truth about Martha's years of sacrifice would finally come out, shaking Daniel's world in a way he never expected. The tension in the room was thick enough to touch. Tom stood at the doorway, his broad shoulders filling the frame, his calm eyes locked on Daniel's startled face. Olivia hovered near the kitchen counter, arms folded, looking both irritated and uncertain. The sound of the clock ticking on the wall made every second feel longer than the last. Daniel finally broke the silence. "Who are you?" he demanded. Tom didn't flinch. "Name's Tom, Martha's brother." Daniel's brows furrowed. "I didn't know she had a brother." Tom's jaw tightened. "That doesn't surprise me." He stepped further into the living room, his tone steady but laced with quiet anger. "She never talked about me because she didn't want to burden you with her past. She always said her son had enough on his plate, a family, a home, responsibilities." Olivia sighed. "Listen, whatever this is, maybe it's not the time." Tom's eyes snapped toward her. "Oh, it's the time. It's long overdue." Daniel crossed his arms. "You can't just barge into my house and—" "I can," Tom interrupted sharply. "When it's my sister's house, too. The house she helps keep clean, the one she wakes up early to care for, the one she's made a home for you." Daniel's mouth opened, then closed again. His gaze shifted, uncomfortable. Tom walked over to the kitchen counter and held up the torn letter. "You read this?" Daniel nodded stiffly. "Yeah." Tom's voice dropped low and heavy. "Then you know what she's been feeling. What you and your wife have been doing to her." Olivia's tone grew defensive. "We haven't done anything wrong. She's difficult, always hovering around, always trying to tell us what to do. It's exhausting." Tom turned toward her, his expression unreadable. "You're lucky to have someone who still cares enough to hover, Olivia. Some of us would give anything to have our mother still alive to annoy us." Olivia's lips pressed into a thin line, but she said nothing. Tom continued, his voice growing softer. "You know what she told me today? That she feels like a ghost in her own home. That she cooks, cleans, and tiptoes around like a stranger because she's afraid of upsetting you." Daniel looked down, his chest tightening. Images flashed through his mind. His mother quietly setting his breakfast. The faint sound of her footsteps as she avoided conversation. The tired smile she always forced when he came home late. Tom stepped closer, his voice now steady but laced with sorrow. "She raised you after your father died, Daniel. Worked 2 jobs, sold her wedding jewelry to pay your college tuition. I told her not to, but she said, 'My boy deserves a future.'" Daniel's head jerked up, eyes wide. She sold her jewelry?" Tom nodded. "Every last piece. I was there. She didn't tell you because she didn't want you to feel guilty." The room fell silent. Even Olivia looked away now. At that moment, the sound of the front door opening broke the stillness. Martha stepped in, holding a small grocery bag, her face pale with confusion as she saw everyone frozen in the living room. "Tom?" she whispered. "What's going on?" Tom smiled faintly, but his voice trembled. "Just setting things right, sis." Daniel turned toward her, guilt flooding his face. "Mom, But the words wouldn't come. Martha set the bag down slowly. She looked from her son to her brother, then to Olivia, reading their faces like a mother who already knew too much. "Tom," she said softly, "you didn't have to do this." He shook his head. "Yes, I did. Someone had to remind them who you are." Martha's eyes glistened with tears. "I'm just tired, Tom. I don't want fights. I just want peace." Tom placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then maybe it's time peace finally found you." That night, Martha made a decision that would surprise everyone, a choice that would take her from quiet pain to the heart of a courtroom, where justice and family would collide in a way no one saw coming. The night settled heavy over Cedar Grove, blanketing the greenhouse in an uneasy quiet. Dinner had come and gone without a word. Olivia ate quickly and excused herself to their bedroom. Daniel sat on the couch, staring at the floor. while Martha washed the dishes, the same way she always did. Only now the silence between them screamed louder than before. Tom lingered near the window, his hands folded behind his back. "You can't keep living like this, Martha," he said quietly. "You deserve better." Martha didn't turn around. "Better than my own son's home?" Tom sighed. "You know what I mean." She dried her hands and faced him. Her eyes were tired but resolute. "If I walk away now, what lesson does that teach him? That you can treat people any way you want and still call it family?" Tom tilted his head. "And what about you? What lesson does this teach you?" Martha looked down, her fingers tracing the cracks in the old countertop. "That love can become a weapon if you let it." Daniel stirred on the couch, his voice low. "Mom, please don't talk like that." Martha glanced at him, the first real eye contact they'd shared in weeks. "Then how should I talk, Daniel? Like nothing's wrong? Like your words don't break me a little more each day?" He swallowed hard, guilt twisting in his chest. She smiled sadly. "But you did." For a long moment the room held its breath. Then with quiet certainty Martha said, "I'm not leaving, Tom, not yet." Tom frowned. "Martha, I'm not running away from my own life," she interrupted. "I'm going to fight for it." Tom's eyes softened with pride. "Then I'll stand beside you." The next morning, while the house was still waking up, Martha made a call. Her voice was steady as she spoke to the woman on the other end, a local social worker named Grace Holloway. Grace had been part of a community program that supported elderly citizens facing family neglect or emotional abuse. By noon, Grace arrived, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and a gentle tone. She listened quietly as Martha shared everything: the insults, the isolation, the overheard conversation about the nursing home. Grace took careful notes, nodding. "Martha," she said softly, "you have a right to live with dignity. You can file for a protective hearing in family court. Not to punish your son, but to make it clear that no one, not even family, can treat you this way." Martha hesitated. "Court, I don't want to drag my family through that." Grace leaned forward. "Sometimes love needs accountability. The court can order mediation or counseling. It can set boundaries. And maybe, just maybe, it can make Daniel see what he's done." Martha thought for a long moment. She looked out the window, where autumn leaves danced across the street, like fragments of an old life being carried away. Then she nodded. "All right, I'll do it." When Grace left, Tom squeezed his sister's shoulder. "You're stronger than you think, Martha." She smiled faintly. "No, Tom, I'm just finally tired of being weak." Upstairs, behind a half-closed door, Olivia listened, her face pale. She whispered to herself, "Court? She's taking us to court?" Daniel, still in bed, stirred. "What did you say?" Olivia turned slowly, her eyes sharp. "Your mother's planning something big, Daniel. And if you don't stop her, we're both going to regret it." When Martha walks into the courtroom, she'll face not just the law, but her own son, who's ready to fight back. Yet one unexpected witness will turn the case and the entire town on its head. The courthouse in Cedar Grove was an old red brick building that smelled faintly of paper, polish, and history. As Martha stepped through its heavy wooden doors, her palms trembled. She wasn't used to this kind of place. The long hallways, the echo of footsteps, the quiet weight of judgment that seemed to hang in the air. Tom walked beside her, his hand steady on her shoulder. "You don't have to do this alone," he whispered. "I know," she said softly, her eyes fixed ahead. "But I need to do it." Inside the small family courtroom, the atmosphere was tense. Daniel sat at one table with Olivia, both looking uneasy but defiant. Martha sat at the other table with Grace Holloway, the social worker who had become her quiet anchor. The judge, an older woman named Judge Carolyn Reeves, adjusted her glasses and glanced through the case file. "This is a hearing for emotional and domestic neglect under the Elder Respect Protection Act," Judge Reeves began, her voice firm but kind. "Mrs. Martha Green has requested a ruling to establish safe boundaries and ensure mutual respect within the family home." Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "Your Honor," he began, "this whole thing has been blown out of proportion. My mother's... She's just sensitive. We never meant any harm," Judge Reeves looked up. Mr. Green, neglect isn't always physical. Sometimes the wounds we can't see are the deepest. Martha's throat tightened. Her voice shook slightly as she spoke. Your Honor, I didn't come here to hurt my son. I came because I've been invisible in my own home. I cook, clean, and stay out of their way. And yet, I hear the whispers, the sighs, the shame of being unwanted. The courtroom was still. Even Olivia looked uneasy. Grace stepped forward. Your Honor, Mrs. Green has endured persistent verbal belittlement and isolation. The court's intervention isn't about punishment. It's about dignity. Daniel leaned forward, frustration breaking through his guilt. She's making me sound like a monster. I work every day to support this house, and she... Judge Reeves raised a hand. Enough. This is not about blame, Mr. Green. This is about responsibility. For a moment, no one spoke. The judge turned to Martha again. Mrs. Green, is there anything else you'd like to say before I review the evidence? Martha hesitated, and then reached into her purse. She pulled out an old photograph. Daniel, at 10 years old, holding his first school trophy. I kept this picture beside my bed all these years, she said softly. Every night, I'd look at it and remind myself that raising him was the best thing I ever did. But lately, I look at it and wonder if that little boy would even recognize the man he's become. Daniel's eyes dropped. His jaw clenched, and then a voice came from the back of the courtroom. Your Honor, if I may speak. Everyone turned. It was Mrs. Langford, their elderly neighbor from across the street. She clutched her cane, her voice trembling but clear. I've lived next to the Greens for 2 years. I've seen how that poor woman sits on the porch alone. I've heard the shouting. I've seen her cry while hanging laundry. You don't have to hit someone to break them, Your Honor. A hush fell over the courtroom. Daniel looked like he'd been struck. Olivia's face turned pale. Judge Reeves nodded slowly. Thank you, Mrs. Langford. That will be noted. Martha's eyes filled with tears. She hadn't expected anyone to speak for her, not after feeling so unseen for so long. The judge cleared her throat. This court recognizes Mrs. Green's right to respect and emotional safety. I am ordering mandatory family counseling and community service for both Mr. and Mrs. Green to rebuild the foundation of this family. And let this be a message to everyone here. Respect for one's parents is not a favor. It is a duty. Martha closed her eyes, a tear rolling down her cheek. Tom reached over and squeezed her hand. You did it, he whispered. But across the room, Olivia's glare was sharp and cold. This wasn't over, not for her. In the days after the hearing, Daniel begins to see his mother differently, but Olivia's bitterness grows darker. And one night, her anger will spark an act that will shake the Green family all over again. The days that followed the court hearing felt strangely quiet, like the calm that settles over a town after a thunderstorm, where the air still hums with tension, and everyone waits for the next flash of lightning. Martha returned home with Tom beside her, and though she tried to act as if things were normal, the silence from Daniel and Olivia's side of the house spoke louder than words. The court had ordered family counseling and community service, a public reminder of what had gone wrong. To Olivia, it wasn't justice. It was humiliation. That first evening back, Martha sat alone at the kitchen table, folding laundry. Daniel came in quietly, hands buried in his pockets. He stood there for a moment watching her. Mom. His voice was softer than she remembered. I'm sorry. For everything. She looked up, startled. Daniel? I should have listened. I shouldn't have let things get this far. His voice cracked. When I saw you up there in that courtroom, I realized I haven't been the son you raised me to be. Martha's eyes filled, but she said nothing. She just reached out and took his hand, the same hand she'd held when he took his first steps. It's never too late to be kind, she whispered. From the hallway, Olivia stood half hidden, listening. Her expression was unreadable, hurt, anger, maybe even fear. When Daniel left the kitchen to help Tom unload groceries, she stepped forward. So this is what you wanted, Olivia said coldly. To make him feel guilty? To turn him against me? Martha turned slowly, calm but firm. No, Olivia. I never wanted him against you. I only wanted him to see, Olivia scoffed. See what? That you can cry your way into getting sympathy from a judge? You embarrassed us, Martha. Everyone in this town is talking. I didn't embarrass you, Martha said softly. Your choices did, Olivia's eyes flashed. You think this changes anything? You think I'm just going to sit here while you make me look like the villain? Martha looked at her steadily. You don't have to look like one, Olivia. You just have to stop being one. That line, quiet but firm, landed like a blow. Olivia's jaw clenched. Without another word, she turned and stormed upstairs, the sound of her heels echoing like angry punctuation marks. Later that night, the sky opened up with rain. Thunder rolled across Cedar Grove, and the house groaned with every gust of wind. Martha stood by her bedroom window, watching the storm lash. Against the glass, she loved storms. They made her feel alive, even when everything else felt broken. She didn't hear Olivia come downstairs. In the kitchen, Olivia moved quickly, her face twisted in frustration. She grabbed Martha's folded court papers from the counter, the official documents outlining the judge's orders, and threw them into the sink. Then she struck a match. The flame flared, orange and hungry. For a second she stared at it, the heat reflected in her eyes, before dropping it into the sink. The papers caught instantly, curling into blackened ash as smoke curled toward the ceiling. When Martha smelled it, that sharp, acrid scent, she rushed downstairs. Olivia, what's happening? Olivia spun around, startled but unrepentant. I'm cleaning up your mess, Martha. Martha's voice trembled. You burned a court order. That's not cleaning, that's destroying the truth. Olivia's expression cracked, fury mixing with panic. You've destroyed my life, she screamed. You've made me look like a monster in front of everyone. The front door burst open. Daniel and Tom stood there, soaked from the rain, staring at the scene, the smoke, the flames dying in the sink, and Martha trembling by the counter. Olivia, Daniel's voice thundered. What did you do? Olivia's anger faltered. She turned toward him, her voice suddenly small. I just wanted it to stop. Martha stepped back, tears welling in her eyes. And this is how you stop it? Thunder boomed outside, shaking the windows. In that flash of lightning, Daniel finally saw the full picture. His wife's rage, his mother's pain, and his own silence hanging between them like a ghost. He took a deep breath. This ends tonight. As dawn breaks after the storm, Daniel makes a decision that shocks everyone, one that could heal his family. Or tear it apart forever. When dawn finally broke, Cedar Grove was wrapped in a heavy gray mist. The storm had passed, but the air was still thick, as if the sky itself hadn't finished grieving. The roof dripped rhythmically, and puddles shimmered across the driveway, mirroring the fractured light of morning. Inside the house, silence reigned, a silence so deep it almost hummed. Martha sat at the kitchen table again, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea she hadn't touched. The smell of smoke from last night still lingered faintly, woven into the air like a memory that refused to fade. Across from her, Daniel stood by the counter, his expression unreadable. Olivia hadn't come downstairs yet. He finally spoke. Mom, I can't pretend this is normal anymore. Martha looked up slowly, her eyes tired but calm. Nothing about this has been normal for a long time, Daniel, he nodded. Last night I realized I've been watching you suffer, knowing it and doing nothing. I let Olivia's words become my silence. I let my own fear of conflict make me a coward. Daniel, no, Mom, let me finish. He took a deep breath, his voice steady now. I need to fix this, not with words, with action. Before Martha could ask what he meant, Olivia appeared in the doorway. Her eyes were swollen, her hair tangled from a sleepless night. What's going on? She muttered, glancing between them. Daniel turned toward her. We need to talk. Olivia folded her arms. If this is about last night, it's about everything, he interrupted firmly. The disrespect, the anger, the cruelty. It ends today, she scoffed. You sound like your mother. He didn't flinch. Maybe I should have years ago, Olivia blinked, thrown off by the firmness in his tone. So what now? You're taking her side? I'm not choosing sides, he said. I'm choosing what's right. I can't live in a home filled with hate anymore. I won't. Her lips trembled, a mix of fury and fear. You'd throw away our marriage over this? Daniel's jaw clenched. I'd throw away anything that destroys the people I love. The words hit her like a slap. For a long moment no one spoke. Outside, the world seemed to hold its breath. Even the birds were quiet. Finally, Martha stood. "Daniel," she said softly, "this isn't about revenge. It's about peace. Don't let anger guide you, not now." He turned to her, his voice heavy with emotion. "Mom, this isn't anger. It's accountability. I can't let my children grow up thinking cruelty is normal. They saw everything and I can't undo that. But I can show them what change looks like." Martha's eyes glistened with pride and heartbreak. She reached out, gently touching his arm. "Then whatever you do it with kindness. Always." Daniel nodded. Then he looked at Olivia. "We're taking a break, you and I. You need space, and I need to rebuild what I destroyed, starting with her." He gestured toward Martha. Olivia stared at him, disbelief written across her face. "You're leaving me? Over her?" "No," he said softly. "I'm leaving the part of us that forgot how to love." Tears spilled down Olivia's cheeks, the kind that came not from sadness, but realization. For the first time her voice cracked. "I didn't mean to hurt her. I just felt pushed out, like I'd never measure up." Martha's heart clenched. "Olivia, I never wanted to replace you. I only wanted to be part of your lives." The younger woman's defenses finally faltered. Her breath hitched, and for a moment she looked lost, like a child who had finally run out of anger. Daniel stepped closer. "Then let's stop fighting the wrong enemy," he said gently. "We can fix this, but only if you're willing." Olivia didn't respond. She just turned away, her shoulders trembling, and went upstairs without another word. The sound of her footsteps faded, leaving only the faint ticking of the clock and the soft clink of Martha setting her cup down. Daniel sat beside her, his face buried in his hands. Martha reached out, stroking his hair like she did when he was a boy. "You did the right thing," she whispered. He looked up, eyes red but resolute. "I hope so. For all of us." Outside, the first beam of sunlight broke through the gray, weak but real. But just as the family begins to heal, an unexpected visitor arrives at the door. Someone from Martha's past who carries a truth that could change everything. That afternoon, as the storm clouds scattered and the sun began to dry the soaked streets of Cedar Grove, Martha finally allowed herself a moment of quiet. She stepped onto the porch, her shawl draped loosely over her shoulders, breathing in the scent of rain-soaked earth. For the first time in months, she felt the faintest whisper of peace. Daniel had taken Tom to school, and Olivia remained upstairs, silent behind a closed door. The house, for once, was still. Martha sat in her rocking chair, eyes closed, listening to the faint hum of the wind chimes. But just as she began to drift into thought, a sound broke the calm, the crunch of tires on gravel. She opened her eyes and saw a dark blue car pull into the driveway. The driver's door opened slowly, and out stepped a man in his late 50s, tall and broad-shouldered, with streaks of silver in his hair. He looked around, hesitant, before his eyes met hers. "Martha?" His voice was deep, careful, as if afraid to startle her. Martha's breath caught. She rose slowly, hand clutching the railing. "David?" He nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "It's been a long time." The years melted in an instant. David, her late husband's brother, the man who had left Cedar Grove decades ago after a bitter family fallout, the one who hadn't even attended his brother's funeral. "What are you doing here?" she asked softly, a dozen old emotions swirling behind her calm tone. He took a slow step forward. "I came because I heard what happened. The court case, your son, everything." Martha's brows furrowed. "How did you—" "Small towns," he said with a weary chuckle. "News travels fast, even across states," she sighed, motioning for him to sit. "You didn't come all this way just to gossip about my family, David. Why are you really here?" He hesitated. His hands trembled slightly as he pulled a folded envelope from his jacket. "Because your husband wanted you to have this, and I was too much of a coward to deliver it." Martha froze. "My husband? But Richard's been gone for 20 years. David nodded. "He wrote it before he died. I found it among his things after the funeral. It was meant for you, but He exhaled shakily. "I was angry. At him, at life. I didn't think you'd want to hear from me." She stared at the letter, the yellowed paper trembling in his hands, as if afraid to touch it. For years she had dreamed of one more message, one more word from Richard. And now, suddenly, it was here, breathing in front of her like a ghost from the past. With trembling fingers, she took it. The envelope was brittle, the ink faded, but his handwriting, oh, she'd know it anywhere. "May I?" she whispered. David nodded. She tore the envelope gently and unfolded the paper. Her eyes scanned the words, her lips trembling as she began to read. "My dearest Martha, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't tell you what I needed to while I still had time. I've made mistakes, not in loving you, but in how I carried that love. You gave everything to this family, and I often forgot to show you how much you mattered. If one day our son forgets, remind him of the kind of woman who built his world. Remind him that kindness is strength, not weakness. You are the heart of this home, and no storm, not even my absence, can take that away. With all my love, always, Richard." Tears streamed silently down Martha's face as she read. Her hands shook, but her eyes glowed with a bittersweet warmth. "I waited so long to hear something like this," she whispered, voice breaking. David's eyes softened. "He loved you more than you'll ever know. He just didn't know how to say it." Martha folded the letter carefully, holding it against her chest. "You should have brought this sooner, David." "I know," he said quietly. "And I'll never forgive myself for waiting this long." She looked up at him, her voice gentle. "Forgiveness isn't given in one moment. It's lived." They sat together for a long while, the weight of old years finally lifting. But inside the house, a shadow stirred. Olivia, standing by the window upstairs, watching the two of them talk. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Who's that?" she murmured to herself. She turned away, her mind racing. She didn't know who this man was, but something in her gut twisted. Ever since the court ruling, she'd felt the control slipping from her hands, and now, with this stranger here, she sensed change in the air again, and she didn't like it. That night, Olivia decides to uncover the truth about the mysterious visitor, but what she finds hidden in Richard's old letterbox will shatter everything Martha thought she knew about her husband's past. Night crept over Cedar Grove quietly, the kind of darkness that carried secrets in its silence. The wind rustled the trees, brushing softly against the windows of Martha's house. Inside, all seemed still, except for the faint glow from the upstairs hallway, where Olivia stood barefoot, clutching her phone. Her thoughts a storm of suspicion. The image of that man, tall, calm, his voice too familiar, kept replaying in her mind. He had stayed for hours, talking with Martha like they'd known each other their entire lives. The laughter, the tears, it all made Olivia uneasy. Who was he really? Downstairs, Martha had gone to bed, the old letter from her late husband tucked carefully into her Bible. Daniel had fallen asleep on the couch after another long day, his arm draped over a pillow, exhaustion written on his face. The house was quiet, vulnerable. Olivia took the opportunity. She crept down the stairs slowly, her steps deliberate, her pulse hammering in her ears. The letter David had delivered earlier lay on the coffee table beside Martha's teacup. She stared at it, the edges yellowed, the ink faded, and felt a strange pull, part jealousy, part curiosity. "This man shows up after 20 years, she whispered under her breath, "and suddenly everyone's crying over him." She picked up the envelope and studied it carefully. On the back, barely visible under the light, was a faint impression, like a second fold, a seal that had once been pressed and reopened. Her brows furrowed. Then she noticed something odd, a small note, written faintly in Richard's handwriting. Just beneath the main letter's fold. "If this reaches you too late, check the old letterbox in the shed." Her eyes widened. The old letterbox? She knew the one, an old, rusted thing behind the house, once nailed to a post near the shed where Richard used to work on his carpentry. It had been there forever, half buried under ivy and dirt. Without thinking twice, she slipped on her shoes, grabbed a flashlight, and stepped into the cool night. The air smelled of wet leaves and wood smoke. The ground squelched beneath her feet as she made her way to the backyard. The shed loomed ahead, its roof sagging, one window cracked. The moonlight glimmered on the rusted metal of the letterbox nailed to the old post. She reached it, brushing away dirt and cobwebs. Her heart pounded. The latch was rusted shut. She pulled harder, gritting her teeth, until finally, with a metallic snap, it gave way. Inside were several yellowed envelopes, all addressed to Martha Caldwell. Each one bore the same handwriting, Richard Caldwell, but the postmarks told a strange story. Some were never mailed, and others had been stamped years after Richard's death. "What? What is this?" she whispered, pulling them out with trembling hands. She opened one. The letter inside was shorter than the one David had delivered. "Martha, if anything ever happens to me, you must know. Not everything you've been told is true. David knows. He promised to protect you. But there are things he hid. Things about the accident that took the farm." Olivia froze. The accident. She had heard the stories. How a fire destroyed the Caldwell family farm decades ago, taking most of their savings with it. Richard was blamed for negligence, and that's when the family began to fall apart. She read another letter, her hands shaking. "If they ever find out what David did, he'll be ruined. But I can't protect him anymore. I hope one day you'll forgive us both." Her flashlight trembled. "David did something?" Suddenly, the crunch of gravel behind her made her spin around. The flashlight beam darted wildly and caught the glint of someone standing in the shadows. "Olivia?" a familiar voice said quietly. She gasped. "David!" He stepped closer, his expression unreadable. "You shouldn't be out here." She held up the letters. "You lied to her." "You've been lying for 20 years, his jaw tightened. "You don't understand what those letters mean." "I understand enough," she shot back. "You came here pretending to bring peace, but you're hiding something. You and Richard both." David took another step forward, his face etched with pain. "I didn't come here to lie. I came here to end the lie." "Then tell me," Olivia demanded, her voice trembling but defiant. "What really happened the night of the fire?" For a moment he said nothing. The wind whistled softly through the trees. Then with a deep, broken sigh, he said the words that made Olivia's blood run cold. "It wasn't an accident, Olivia. It was me." Her breath caught. "You, what?" David's eyes glistened in the beam of the flashlight. "I caused the fire that ruined everything. Richard took the blame to protect me, and it killed him inside." The world seemed to tilt. Olivia's knees weakened. "You're lying." "I wish I were." His voice cracked. That letter was his forgiveness. Mine never came. The flashlight flickered once, then went out. The next morning, Martha discovers the torn, soot-stained letters in Olivia's hands. And as David's confession unravels, she learns a truth that changes not only her past, but the entire future of her family. Morning crept in slowly, pale light spilling through the curtains, brushing the edges of the living room where Martha sat, her Bible open on her lap. The house was quiet, too quiet, the kind of quiet that follows something about to break. She hadn't seen Olivia since last night. Daniel had gone out early to pick up supplies for the store, and Tom was still asleep upstairs. The silence felt heavy, as if every wall in the house was holding its breath. Then came the sound of footsteps, hesitant, dragging. Martha looked up to see Olivia in the doorway. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes rimmed red, and in her trembling hands were the old soot-stained letters. "Martha," she whispered, her voice cracking. "We need to talk," Martha frowned. "What happened?" "You look like you've seen a ghost." Olivia stepped forward and set the bundle of letters on the table. "I found these in the old letterbox behind the shed. Richard wrote them, all of them." Martha's breath caught. "You went through the shed?" "I had to," Olivia said quickly. "There was something he wanted you to see. Something about the fire." Martha's hand froze over the papers. For a moment she couldn't breathe. The fire. The one that had burned everything they owned 20 years ago. The fire that had driven them into debt and changed her husband from a hopeful dreamer into a haunted man. "What do you mean?" she asked softly. Before Olivia could answer, the front door opened. David stepped inside. He looked exhausted, his face pale, his eyes shadowed by the kind of guilt that eats a man alive. "Don't," he said quietly, seeing the letters on the table. "Please, Martha. Don't read them." Martha rose slowly, her heart pounding. "You knew about these?" He nodded once. I was hoping you wouldn't have to. She opened the first letter, her hands trembling. Richard's handwriting, uneven but familiar, danced across the page. Martha, if you ever find this, it means David couldn't bring himself to tell you. I took the blame for the fire because he's my brother, because he was scared, and I thought I could protect him. But I was wrong. It wasn't the accident everyone believed. He'd been drinking that night, using my tools. I wanted to tell you, he whispered. Every day for 20 years I wanted to, but I couldn't face you. I couldn't face what I'd done. Olivia watched, silent, tears streaking her face. Martha's voice rose, not in anger, but in the raw ache of betrayal. You let me think he was careless. You let me bury him with that shame. David's eyes filled. He made me promise not to tell you. He said love meant protecting you from the truth. Martha shook her head, stepping away, her breath trembling. Love built on lies isn't love. It's fear. For a long moment no one spoke. The morning light hit the table, spilling over the open letters like a spotlight on the truth that had finally crawled out of the dark. Then Martha sank into her chair, burying her face in her hands. I spent half my life missing a man I never really understood. And now, I don't even know what's real anymore. Olivia knelt beside her, voice trembling. Martha, I didn't mean to find them. But maybe it's good that we know now. Maybe this is how healing starts. David looked at her, surprised that the same woman who once hated Martha was now the one comforting her. Martha lifted her head slowly, her eyes red but fierce. Healing doesn't start with secrets. It starts with truth, no matter how much it hurts. She looked straight at David. You're going to tell Daniel everything. He deserves to know. We all do, David hesitated. He'll never forgive me. Martha wiped her tears. Then you'll have to live with that, just like I've lived with the silence. The old clock on the wall ticked slowly, marking the moment. A family built on generations of love and lies, finally forced to confront both. David swallowed hard. I'll tell him tonight, Martha nodded. Good, because if there's one thing my husband taught me, even in his silence, it's that truth has to outlive the people who hide it. She picked up the last letter and stared at it, her voice barely a whisper. And maybe this is how he's finally free. That evening, when David gathers the family to confess, another secret surfaces, one hidden not in the letters, but in the ashes of the old farm, a secret that will reveal why Richard truly took the blame, and what he was protecting all along. Evening fell over Cedar Grove like a veil, soft, dusky, and full of the kind of stillness that makes hearts uneasy. The Caldwell house glowed with lamplight, and for the first time in decades, every truth, every lie, every ghost of the past gathered under one roof. David sat at the edge of the living room couch, his hands clasped tightly, staring at the floor. Martha stood near the window, her arms folded across her chest. Daniel sat beside Tom, who watched the adults quietly, too young to understand, but old enough to feel the tension in the air. Olivia lingered near the doorway, unsure whether she belonged inside the circle or out. The fire crackled faintly in the hearth, an almost cruel echo of the story they were about to unearth. David took a long breath. There's more you need to know, he began, his voice low, heavy. About that night, the fire, and what came after. Daniel leaned forward. You already said you caused it. What else could there be? David's eyes flicked up, raw, haunted. Richard didn't just take the blame. He chose to. Because there was something in that barn that would have destroyed the whole family if anyone ever found out. Martha frowned, confused. What are you talking about? He hesitated. There was a ledger, an account book. Not from the farm, from your husband's side business. Money he'd been investing quietly, trying to keep the farm afloat. But the funds came from people who didn't exactly do things legally. Martha's breath caught. Illegal money? David nodded. He didn't mean harm, Martha. He was desperate. The drought that year nearly ruined you both. He took a loan from a private lender who laundered money through local properties. When I found out, I panicked. I thought I could burn the ledger and end it before anyone discovered what he'd done. Daniel's voice cracked with disbelief. So you set the fire to protect him? David's eyes glistened. Yes, but I didn't realize he was in the barn. The room went still. The sound of the fire in the hearth seemed to fade into nothing. Martha's face went pale, her hand covering her mouth. He was inside? David's voice trembled. He went back for the ledger. I tried to stop him, but the flames spread faster than I imagined. He made it out alive that night, but the smoke, the injuries, they took everything from him. His health, his pride, his hope. He made me swear to keep quiet, to let everyone think it was negligence, because he said his mistakes were his alone. Tears filled Martha's eyes. He carried your guilt, David. All those years, he blamed himself to protect you? And you, David said softly. He didn't want your name tied to that money. He thought if anyone found out, you'd lose everything. So he burned with the lie. Olivia wiped her tears silently, her earlier anger dissolving into quiet heartbreak. Daniel's fists clenched in his lap. I spent half my life angry at him, Daniel whispered. I thought he ruined us. I thought he gave up. David's voice broke. He never gave up, son. He just ran out of time. Martha turned away, walking toward the fireplace. The flames reflected in her tear-filled eyes. He thought love meant silence, but silence only buried us all deeper. No one spoke for a long time. The truth hung in the air like smoke, visible, choking, but finally real. Then, gently, Daniel stood. He looked at David, the uncle he'd barely known, and for a long, painful moment, they just stared at each other. Finally, Daniel said quietly, "You're not leaving until we put this right." David frowned. "How can you fix something that's already burned?" "By rebuilding it," Daniel said. "The right way, together." Martha turned, her voice soft but steady. "He's right. The truth doesn't destroy families, David. Secrets do. And I won't let another generation grow up in the shadow of lies." Tom looked up from his chair. "Grandma, are we going to build the farm again?" Martha knelt beside him, her tired eyes brightening with something new, something like hope. "Maybe not the same farm, sweetheart, but something better, something honest." The room, heavy with sorrow moments ago, seemed to breathe again, outside. The wind carried the scent of rain over the land. The same earth that had seen their ruin might now witness their rebirth. David looked at Martha, voice trembling. "You'll never forgive me, will you?" She held his gaze for a long moment. Then softly she said, "Forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about freeing yourself from the fire that keeps burning inside you." David bowed his head, tears spilling freely. "Then maybe tonight I'll start trying." The clock ticked, slow and steady, a new rhythm, a new beginning. The next morning, Martha returns to the ruins of the old farm for the first time in 20 years. But what she uncovers beneath the ashes will reveal one final message from Richard. One that changes everything she thought she knew about love, loss, and redemption. Dawn broke soft and silver across Cedar Grove, the air thick with dew and the faint scent of wet earth. Mist curled along the fields where the Caldwell farm once stood, a ghost of the past still clinging to the land. Martha stood at the edge of the property, her boots sinking slightly into the damp soil. The ruins of the barn lay before her, warped beams, rusted tools, and patches of blackened earth where fire had once raged like judgment. She hadn't set foot here since that night. 20 years of avoidance, of fear, of grief too heavy to carry. Now she had come to face it.